Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you are. Thank you for stopping by, checking out this video. My name is Bradley Roenfeld, and I'm doing a brief overview of my capstone project for Trident University, and this is over the G6 in the Iowa Army National Guard. So if you'll please sit back and just hang out with me for a little bit, and we'll go over everything about it. So here we go. So here's today's agenda and everything that's going to be taking place. We're going to go over a little introduction here. Like I said, hello, hi, Bradley. We're going to go over what is the G6 exactly, the perspective and relevant general systems there within the G6. What does it take to be a director or senior level leader in the G6? So IT management, what this degree is about, Master of Science in IT management, so how you can be a successful IT management leader within this organization. It could translate to civilian side as well. Otherwise, we're going to also go over the impacts of the external and internal environments. So where is this G6 that we keep talking about, or I keep talking about? So if you'll see here that there's a big scope that we have. There's the military. You can see in the back one of the biggest bubbles that we have here. This is definitely not to scale, but it's to show, in the military we have Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard. There's a lot of different branches within the military, and so this G6 is we're going to go down one more to the Army. So we're going to the Army branch of the military. And so in the Army, you have the active component, the reserves, and the National Guard. Well, there's a lot of different National Guards throughout the different states, the whole country of the U.S. So we're going to focus, though, however, on this one in the Iowa Army National Guard. And with that being said, there's a lot of different departments or organizations within the state of Iowa, and we're going to go down to a smaller bubble, which is the G6. So might be small in scope, but at the same time, you can see where it kind of lands within this whole entire thing. So what makes up the G6? Well, right off the bat, there's the Deputy CIO. That's usually a lieutenant colonel or to colonel, and that's basically the highest level for this department. You'll find that on the civilian side, CIO is someone pretty high up on the ladder there. Next, we have the XO, Executive Officer. That's the Deputy CIO. Major level or rank. As you can see, I put the ranks there as well for you to kind of get the parallels between civilian side and the titles, and then the military side as well. They have the Command Sergeant Major. That's an E9. They help out with helping. It is basically the right hand, helping that commander out. And then we have the Alternative Programs Manager, a Budget Analyst, and from there you can see the different ways it branches out to what type of operations that might be taking place within the G6. So if you think about this in the terms of a company, have your team lead, an assistant manager, and it goes on from there, or a couple assistant managers to help with a bunch of different teams. Here are the challenges that are faced when working within the G6. So the G6 is both state and federally funded. Well, the National Guard is anyways. That can be kind of tricky depending on where getting resources, whether it's funding or different types of things coming in to handle. That can be a challenge because there's a lot of different shareholders, right? There's a bunch of different people within leadership positions that work towards coming in. So yeah, the CIO might be the top one within that department. However, there's still those higher echelons, those leaders that are working and pushing information down, or different types of guidances that may alter certain pathways and different ways to go. Sometimes there's not up-to-date technology, even though it is a big portion of the state and how to help different soldiers or contractors, civilians, everyone that works within it. The technology might be outdated, and those antiquated things that we work with, it could kind of present some challenges with not being the fastest, the best way to process things and get things moving. So working with that is pretty much a challenge there. In-state deployments, we'll go in further in this, but within the state of Iowa, there are issues that can arise from emergency weather services and other missions that may happen. We had COVID. Obviously, everyone dealt with COVID. We had a lot of soldiers that had in-state deployments, and they were working with helping those, the COVID test sites and things like that around the state. Actual deployments for soldiers that go overseas, soldiers leaving the country that they'll pull the soldiers away if they have to leave with their unit out of the organization of the G6. So sometimes you might be down 1 or 2, maybe 5 people depending on the unit that got pulled. That can also be something that is faced. Policies and procedural changes that can happen at any given time. These things are living documents. They're not always set in stone. These guidances that come down and how things can fluctuate, that's something that always needs to be worked on. And up-to-date training. Training is great. It helps everyone be ready, able to face anything that comes their way, but if the training isn't there, then there might be some issues that arise later down the road and not being able, better equipped to handle certain situations. So balance, principles, and perspectives. Structure and integrity are important. They need to have the right person doing the right job in the right spot, making sure that the integrity is there so that things may be followed appropriately. The chain of command aspect of it is set in place so things can be, and any issue that arises can be handled at the lowest level, and that may be worked up depending on what that issue is, and if someone may be ill-equipped to handle it, then that first line leader can take it up to the next leader, and so on and so forth, all the way up. There have been instances where I've seen on the civilian side where someone has an issue, instead of going to their assistant manager or manager, I've seen it go all the way up to like the CEO they send an email to or something like that, which can cause a lot of ripples and issues that can be faced. So that chain of command is important to kind of follow and work up and work down based off of that organization internally. Then going into the next one, internal boundaries, knowing your left and right limits of how this organization needs to operate in, so that there's no unnecessary crossovers into different departments and the other organizations that I'll be working with. This equilibrium helps achieve sought-after balance, knowing which levels need to be worked at and regulated accordingly, whether based off of ensuring that the balance is there. That definitely helps. It's always important to have the equilibrium. And systems are put in place and intake, interpret, regulate, and produce data. So these type of systems that are put in, they can help with those on-the-spot corrections. If there's an issue that arises, they can be brought up, fixed immediately, or they can be pinpointing issues that can be worked on to kind of process at a later time or immediately, depending on the severity of the situation that is found or faced. These corrections are definitely not always for gigging somebody or doing something adverse, but instead to help produce and progress rather than regress. Systems don't always have to mean technology. It's true, they don't. Even though we say systems, there are these things. The human interaction aspect of an organization is so important, whether it's training, meetings, or counselings. For example, the on-the-spot corrections that I mentioned, those counselings can be put in place, and these counselings are not necessarily bad. You'll have the individual come in and sit down with you, and you can go over, hey, what went wrong, what went right, let's get a get-well plan together. These are the steps you're going to take to get better, and hopefully that issue does not come back around. Meetings are important to see what's being put out before them, whether it's 30, 60, 90 days, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, depending on how long everything's projected for. This kind of these meetings help be proactive rather than reactive, in the sense that knowing what potentially may happen, the strategies that are put in place, or what you can try to project out further, knowing what those might be, they'll be able to be handled accordingly should something arise. And the training, always important to train. Either if it's recurring training, something needs to happen annually to keep people have their skills sharp and up to date, everything going, or something new that might be coming into the organization, either the G6 or as a whole throughout the state, so that someone who becomes a subject matter expert may be able to go around and either train others on or refine other unit trainings or whatever the case may be. But those kind of systems that are put in place to ensure that there is that nice flow, that work balance that can make sure that everything just runs smooth. So there's more things continued. Policy and procedural changes, those can happen, and even though those might be an issues at times, or challenges, it's important to have them happen. Not to kind of, discombobulate anything or interrupt the workflow, but to ensure that everything is up to date and moving accordingly. If that's not happening, then there needs to be a lot of review and rewrites on everything. Mission change can always happen based off of what the vision is or what the mission might end up being from higher. Everyone has a mission to some degree, whether it's usually in this type of capacity, it's a supporting mission. This unit will support this unit during blank time, or maybe it's continuous and will always be what their mission is. Outside leadership, that can always be something that either can be a blessing or a curse, depending on the situation. This type of balance, though, can really help bring in knowledge from a different source, from a different viewpoint, but it can also clash with the current standing leadership within the organization. So it's a little bit of give and take there. And that can be the same thing with external departments. People have different focuses for what their jobs are. If they're not seeing the type of interaction that they're wanting, then it could definitely clash. So one of the biggest things, though, is providing services while achieving benchmarks. And that ensures that forward progression. Every year, so annually, there are certain benchmarks that need to be met. There are goals that need to be achieved. This type of stuff needs to be deeply rooted within that mission change or those mission statements or whatever the focus is. This all falls on management, no matter what. Leaders are assuming risk all the time. So it's their job to supervise, refine, and implement those changes that they see and deal with throughout the whole entire times during projects or just every day-to-day operations during the year. It's important to see that. So you're going to supervise throughout the whole thing, see that project or those tasks to completion, and then refine a little bit, go over what worked, what didn't work, what can be worked better, refine that and tweak it a little bit, implement those changes, and then go around again. So it's just continuously working to ensure that there's more of an increase in productivity and nothing stays stagnant and just keeps spinning their wheels on stuff. So moving along away from those, here's the pathway to leadership. Now this can be there's a lot here on this slide, I understand, but this is just a way. It just might not be the ideal way from getting up to that leadership position, that CIO of the G6, but at the same time, this is just a pathway that I've seen from people that I've worked with, or what has been told to me through those subject matter experts in this field. So first and foremost, individuals going to enlist in the military, and they're going to get done with their BCT, so basic combat training, and their AIT, which is advanced individual training. There they're going to find their military job, essentially, after their AIT, or during AIT, and that's going to be for, IT management-wise, you'd want to be their 25 uniform, be a signal support specialist, or 25 Bravo, which is an IT specialist. Usually those two are kind of what's being sought after, especially at the very basic level. The scale is normally going to tip into the 25 Bravo side of things just because of IT specialist and the different career path and the trainings one might receive. That might be more beneficial in the long run. But once they become qualified with that military specialty, then they're going to go to the first unit of assignment and start gaining experience, whether that is during the regular drill times, whether that is starting to get in that junior level of leadership. It's going to be important. And also to hopefully find a job on the civilian side or be a federal technician, maybe an active guard reserve, so AGR. That last one is probably unlikely, but things couldn't happen. You never know. But finding a job, either way, civilian or federal tech, that would be important to kind of refine those skills that were just learned and to further gain experience on trying to progress themselves. At this point in time, when they're finding a job, hopefully they either began their civilian education to some degree or either they're completing it. Either way, slice it, whether it's associate's degree, a bachelor's, maybe working on some certificates to be more proficient in something. But at this time, they can become enrolled in the different commissioning schools to become an officer, whether it's OCS, to Officer Candidate School, or the Reserve Officers Training Corps, ROTC. Usually on this pathway, the ROTC may be happening in conjunction with going to school. Some programs are out there to do that. But once they're complete and they finish that commissioning school, that program, and then they commission, then they kind of decide on which branch, officer branch they'd like to go into, essentially. Usually going into signal might be a sought after one, especially going this route to become the CIO. So they'll become a 25 Alpha for becoming a signal corps officer, and then kind of hone in their focus on what type of specialty they might like to have. So next would be gaining leadership experience as an officer. Usually how it goes is you start out as a lieutenant, get some platoon leader time, get executive officer time, maybe company commander time as well. That would be helpful, especially gaining that kind of leadership experience, that quote-unquote manager experience, to sort of refine yourself and get a little bit better. And if not at this point, hopefully they've sought it out well enough and become an EGR position within the Iowa Army National Guard. That'll kind of help them get more deeply rooted within that G6 spot. And after that, they're just going to start working up the ladder and start to work to become the deputy CIO, and then, of course, the CIO at the end of it. So this is what it takes to be a leader. This is not necessarily my personal viewpoints on becoming a leader. This is what I've read through various materials. So I'll try to take my bias out of this best I can. But understanding the various policies by the active component as well as the National Guard. This is important because you have to differentiate between what's being put after the big active duty side and then moving it down to the National Guard side. Normally it does trickle down from active to National Guard. That's just how the flow goes pretty much. But understanding what's being put forward is going to make sure that everything flows smoothly. And being innovative is incredibly important. There's so many different variables that can happen. That's why those meetings from before talked about things that may arise surprisingly, or which may be already thought about. There has to be a certain way. There's no one size fits all to every challenge. Granted, a lot of challenges may be met with something over and over again, and it could work. There's a lot of things that can work, but having the innovation and being able to maneuver and focus on different aspects and try to find different solutions, that's going to be very important. Delegation is a huge aspect for becoming a leader. Not to say like micromanaging, some people work well with that, not a lot of leaders. I mean, some have found success with it, but knowing how to delegate and having that type of trust instilled in your subordinates and giving them the opportunity to rise to an occasion or get some more experience, that's very beneficial. So yeah, knowing how to delegate is a very big aspect of being a leader. And then learning your leadership style and how to work with subordinates. When you have, like I said, that micromanaging, for example, that might be a leadership style that works best for you. Some are very assertive, aggressive, some are laid back, some are passive. There's all these different types of leadership styles, but the most important thing to put into place is the leadership style needs to fit well enough to work with the subordinates and get them to buy in on everything, and to make sure that they want to be a part and work for you and not against you. Different departments throughout the National Guard all have their own focus, their own leadership, their own styles of how they do things and what they need to be working on. Being a leader for the G6 means that you have to work in conjunction with them, and that everything has to be somewhat of a give and take. Knowing those left and right limits on how to work, who to work with, who to ask for help, who to, say that they don't have a place somewhere. It all has to be dealt with in a very tactful manner, mind you, but knowing that is very, very instrumental, to this. Interpreting the mission and vision of the Adjutant General, there is a vision and a mission that is put in place for where that general would like to see the National Guard, the Iowa National Guard, be moved to, be pushed forward to progress to, and each organization within that, so whether it's the G1, 2, 3, 4, 6, whichever it is, they all have their certain missions that they need to accomplish in order to achieve that vision and achieve that end state. So being a leader, especially for this organization, it's important to see that vision, interpret it accordingly, and then make sure that is met. And getting buy-in, like we mentioned with your leadership style, that's what it's going to take. You have to get the buy-in from all the different shareholders, right? All the different people who have stake within the G6. They have to know that the leadership that's being presented is going to be something that they can, back up, that they can trust, and that your employees are going to be able to want to work with you, not for you. They want to work with you. Yeah, there is a differentiation between the two, working for and working with. This might be a little biased. I know I said I'd try to keep it out, but putting it in a little bit, I'd rather want people to work with me and have them want to have that type of interaction rather than being so distant between the leadership and subordinate type working relationship. Achieving goals and benchmarks set for the department. So that mission is put forward, that vision is put forth. There has to be different goals and benchmarks that are met for there to see some kind of continuous forward progression. And a leader needs to be able to work around any type of challenge or issue that is presented to them in order to achieve those goals, no matter what they might be. So now we're moving into the different environments and their challenges. To preface this a little bit, the internal environment is something that the leader of the G6 may be able to handle a little bit better. They can have a little bit more of some type of interaction with it. Some work can be done on their end to make this work in their favor. However, it still may be challenging depending on the situation. So there is multiple missions, like we've mentioned throughout. There's the G6 mission, what they need to accomplish, the Army National Guard's mission, what's been put forth, and the Army's mission as a whole. Each mission hopefully intertwines well enough so that everyone can work cohesively. However, that could end up not scrubbing well with each other, so it could definitely present some type of issue. Position rotation is actually very common, especially for officers. You have to be in a certain position for X amount of time before you're rotated out. And this can alter whether it's the culture of the department or the perception and how the workflow is. Each individual that comes in, hopefully they keep going and producing what has already been established, and maybe bring in a little tweak here and there and add in a little of their own flavor. But regardless of what happens, it is going to alter everything that happens within the department itself from top down. So those position rotations can happen, those outside perceptions of who's looking into your department saying, hey, this leader's not the same as the other, how are they going to work it, do I trust them well enough? It's all getting that trust again from the clients or from other leadership, fellow colleagues, subordinates, whichever the case may be. That employee buy-in is definitely more on the leadership. You got to share the vision correctly with them, give them the why, the so what. Why is everyone working to this common goal? Ensuring that everyone has their specific job that they're needing to do. So as long as they understand what their job is and why it is important, then that's going to get a lot more positive feedback towards them. And beating burnout, that's really difficult to do, especially in the high, tempo that the military is. A lot of people might be worked long hours, maybe working on something for elongated periods of time, and they're just feeling burnout after working so hard for so long that you have to be able to ensure that you're helping your soldiers or subordinates or whomever it is be able to work around that to some degree. Maybe move them out to a different position somewhere else. Maybe move them to get training elsewhere, bring them back too, so they keep things refreshed, re-energized. And that goes into the next bullet of training. And training is so important because you're having your soldiers, subordinates, anyone stay current and up to date on what they need to do to work in their job. But in the same vein, that training needs to be pushed out so they can work and progress themselves also. So being able to show them that you want them to progress in their career, whether it's on the civilian side or the military side, is really important. But depending on what kind of training it is and if it's a necessity for the organization, that's something that the leader has to kind of deal with. The cohesion with other departments, every department is going to have some type of issue, either way you slice it, but at the same time, they're all working to the same goal, the same end state. So they need to have that working groups, those leadership meetings, anything that might be helpful to ensure that everyone is working accordingly. But this can be something that the leader of the G6 can have a lot more, I can't think of the word right now, impact on, depending on the type of leadership style that they have and what they bring and how they interact. The resources I put as an internal environment challenge, even though it can be external. Funding is always a big one. Resource allocation. For funding, since it comes from two different aspects, from federal and state, it can kind of be difficult because one year you might get a lot, and one year you might not. That's going to hinder and basically do a domino effect on everything else that you might need to do. Can you have enough people in your department? Can you make them go do the right trainings that they need? Are you going to be able to get what you need to conduct the job and to ensure that you're meeting that mission? Otherwise, you're going to have to be very creative in trying to figure out what to do. And personnel is a big resource. People are, they can be replaced, but at the same time, people are important. Your personnel are important. They need to be, cultivated. They need to be worked with. Everyone has to be, treated with respect. Everyone has to be well. Personnel, if you don't have a good amount of personnel, then that could really hinder everything that you're working on. And if you're not affecting that accordingly, then that can be a true challenge. So here are the external environments and challenges that may happen. General environments, Iowa is very rough with weather. One day you can have extreme heats, extreme colds, flooding is always a possibility. We can have random storms like the derecho that happened. A lot of different things can come in and really shake up what can happen, but that's nothing that can really be done by the leadership, except they can react, unfortunately, in this way, or be proactive in having some kind of incident response plan or something set forth at the very beginning when they start their position to kind of understand, like, this is what we're going to do in case of this type of weather or this situation. So this general environment going down, political issues, economic conditions, challenges provided by a region, depending on the climate outside of how Iowa is, a lot of these things can, swirl around together and there's only so much that someone can do within their position of authority and power, especially at the G6 level or being the CIO for it. Industry environments are always challenges. Fortunately, we kind of deal with things somewhat internally, or they do here, but there is rivalry between other departments or other G6 from different states. Every state has an Iowa National Guard, and that state has a G6, so it depends on who's going to be able to get allocated what exactly to be known, not known as, or somewhat, it's not necessarily a competition or a rivalry, but just being more progressive and more active throughout the different states to kind of put our name on the map, so to speak, or to put that Iowa National Guard is doing really big and great things, and that leadership, that manager, is going to be the one to kind of push forward and do that. There are threats of substitute products, bargaining power of buyers, threats of new entrants. A lot of different variables can be put from the external environment going in. Can certain contractors be making better products? Would be able to access those products? It all just depends. Sometimes, like money gets tight with funding, won't be able to get those types of resources allocated to us, so we can't go out and get that type of equipment. So that would make it so technology is not at a standstill per se, but it's very limited in what can be achieved based off of getting anything. Threats of new entrants with new technology means, unfortunately, bad actors. There's always going to be some type of person who's wanting to try to not infiltrate per se, but try to get in, disrupt, kind of create chaos, some type of unfortunate situation that no one really wants to have happen. And so the G6 needs to be very cognizant of that, which they absolutely are, and ensure that the proper security and safety is put in place for not just obviously their department, but the entire state as a whole. And there's different ways to deter bad actors or having anyone else come in on the scene that might be shaking things up a little bit. But that is just something that's going to be what they need to be looking out for. So here's the so what. Yet again, more words on page, but this is something that someone needs to be dealing with, or at least cognizant of, in the G6 level. So there must be an understanding that not everything is going to be in the realm of their control. As much as we'd like to control things, there just are things that are out of reach. There's not everything can be handled, and that's going to be something that has to be understood, especially working at such a high level and working for a lot of other individuals. But it's not saying you can't react accordingly to it and try to make the situation better, but every challenge that's presented might not be something that either was thought about or projected to being. And knowing is half the battle, and this will help create a more strategic planning and lead to more proactive work. That being said, even though things might be projected and things like that, we might need to just rear back a little bit and think about what can happen, how things can happen, and understanding that these plans that are put in place, these policies, these different procedures, how to act in case of blank, or if blank happens, this is what we're going to do, this is who's going to do it, who gets tasked out for it, anything that has to deal with kind of working on a challenge or an issue that arises, that's going to be important for that leader to handle. So each section in the G6 operates in their capacity. So from the little small flow chart from the beginning, there's different operations and different focuses within the department as a whole, and each column has X amount of individuals underneath, the subject matter experts that are working in it. That's very important because knowing, like we talked about before, what their cog is in the whole machine, how it is, how important it is to work, but that's not saying that, we can't progress individuals better or have them work at a more higher capacity of understanding that so-and-so might be doing stuff over here in networking, but let them move over here to this section a little bit and then come back later, or have them train with this individual. Just on the off chance of, say, someone can't show up to work, well, this individual did, but they're able to work on this project as well, or just kind of help out, basically. If one thing fails, it does create a domino effect. Should something happen on the secret clearance side or top secret clearance level side, it could create a ripple effect that goes all the way up and potentially affect the active duty component. Unfortunately, I have not seen anything that has happened in that way, shape, or form, but there are situations where things have happened that way, and knowing that just one small misstep can cause such a large issue is important, that the leader understands this and kind of contains everything and ensures that everything's put in place to make sure that doesn't happen. Because if there is a hybrid threat, that means a hybrid solution needs to happen. A hybrid threat is dynamic. It's multiple things happening at once. It's not static. It's not just, well, this happened, now we have to deal with this. This is, 1, 2, 3, 4 more different things happening. So that's where the innovation for that leader is going to have to come in at and ensure that they can handle everything at once, or delegate accordingly with the other leadership in their department or other departments to get help and to make it so things go back to the steady workflow that is sought after. And leaders need to be cognizant of everything in their department. Not saying, yet again, for anything micromanaging level style, but at least be aware of what's happening. Leaders have to understand their people, they have to understand the mission, they have to understand the tasks that are being put out, and they also have to be aware of other departments that they are working with and seeing what they're working at. So then those limits that are put in place to work with, I can only work to here, and then it's going to get muddy and blurry lines over in this person's business. It's just something that a leader has to basically have, is that situational awareness to help make everything better. Here's the summary. So the G6, even though I talked quite a bit, the G6 may seem small in scope, but they have a huge impact on everyone and everything around them. This department can single-handedly, be what holds everything together, communications-wise, whether it's work, transactions, like I just mentioned, communication, anything in the cyber world, from a digital aspect. This organization, this department, has a lot of work cut out for them and does a lot of intricate tasks that ensure that everyone can work together. If something goes wrong and IT goes down for whatever reason, then things are going to be set back a long time for when things were dealt with in an analog style. And that just takes too much time. Time is precious. Time is important. A leader truly knows and understands this, and that's why they're going to be able to handle these situations and ensure that the G6, even though it might seem like it's a small little dot, at the same time, they're going to enforce the importance of it and show how it can be utilized and how it can accomplish the mission. So all in all, a strong IT governance plan needs to be put in place at the very beginning. As soon as that IT manager or whomever the equivalent of the CIO, anybody that comes into this position of leadership has to put this plan in place at the very beginning, whether it's through different meetings, how things are going to be worked, taskings, all the projects to make products, to meet goals, benchmarks, and how to accomplish not just only the general's vision and the mission they have set forth, but to help benefit the entire working army, the Iowa National Guard. It's something that's just going to be put in place. Yep. Well, that really ends it right there for this. I appreciate you just hanging out with me, watching this video at this time. It really means a lot. I appreciate it. Going forward, these next few slides that you're going to see in front of you, these are the different references that I've used for all my different papers throughout this capstone project. You can see there's quite a few of them. I'm putting a few seconds on to each and every slide so you can pause and see the author title and where to get it, whether it's in a web address, or if you can find it in any type of journal or academic publishing. If you would like anything else from me in regarding to information, things that you might be looking for to either write your own papers, whether you're trying to do more on this type of information or if you're just wanting to educate yourself, please feel free to reach out and drop a comment. I might be able to put these into the subject line or something, so you'll be able to pick these out as well. But please feel free to reach out. We'll be receptive as best I can seeing this. I just want to say thanks again for looking through, and thank you for watching with me, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks again.